Good morning, 7 East. We are back, everybody, after our short hiatus, 4-day absence. We're back now, so happy Monday. It is our 20th episode of Free LEPRE Radio, and we're going to break down what you did last week and set up the week for you going forward. We are on the air. Hope you all had a nice weekend. I hope the weather would be getting nicer, but it was actually really cold yesterday, so I don't know what's going on. Hopefully we can enjoy some warm weather soon. Our agenda for today, April 20th. First, we have a big announcement, big top secret announcement you're going to find out in a minute. Second item in our agenda, we're going to conclude the War of 1812 and look at the presidency of James Monroe. James Monroe is our 5th president. And then third thing on our agenda, the fun segment of the day, weird news. Got some very weird stories for you today. So our big announcement first. So due to the fact that school is not going to be in session before May 15th, that news came out last week, and due to the fact that we have gone much farther in the curriculum, I'm left with no choice but to cancel the major graded assignment on America's founding generation. Some of you are going to be cheering at that decision. Others of you are going to be kind of annoyed if you did a lot of work. But for those of you who did a lot of the work already, here's what I want to tell you. If you were one of the people who went ahead and finished it, or the written part, I will accept anything you want to send in as some type of extra credit for 4th quarter. Assuming we return to classes and have normal grades, that can be boosted with extra credit. So I don't want to have your work be for nothing. I can still take what you have, and count it as a way for you to get extra credit in 4th quarter. Now, if you haven't done the project, then I'm just going to have to cancel it because there's no way we can do this creative project remotely, and too much time has passed between the material we were going to do for that project and now, and unfortunately, we have to cancel it. But if you did do something, I will accept it and count it as extra credit. So I've been doing this now for the past 3 weeks, a calendar to kind of show you where this class is going this week. So Monday, April 20th, we have this episode of Free LEPRE Radio. That's our video for today. The impact of the War of 1812 on the presidency of James Monroe. Your assignment today, which I posted early on Friday, so many of you have already done it, but you just have to scroll down to Friday, April 17th, and that is the assignment today, due Wednesday. It's the War of 1812 documentary questions for parts 3 and 4. Google form, multiple choice. We have a Google Meet at 12:30 today. I'm trying a new time for GIMP kits this week. I was told that many of you can't make the 12:30 time. You have other things going on, so I'm making it a little bit later. So the GIMP kits this week will be from 2 to 2:40 on Tuesday and Thursday, and questions keep getting added depending on what we do in the previous days in class. And then the rest of the week, we do John Quincy Adams, our 6th president, and Andrew Jackson, our 7th president. And by Friday, we are done with Unit 6. It was a fast unit. And then we go to Unit 7, Westward Expansion, or better known as the Unit of Oregon Trail. And hopefully we'll be back in school before that unit is over, because I enjoyed that unit a lot, and it would be much better if we did it in person. And then, of course, Google Meet on Friday as well. So now, our main curriculum topic of today, concluding the War of 1812 and a look at the presidency of James Monroe. So the main ideas we should take away from the War of 1812 and the Madison administration. The War of 1812, people always ask, well, did America win? Did America lose? It was basically a tie, but it feels like a win for the United States of America because America stood up for itself against a stronger country, it survived, and in the end became much stronger as a country together. It reminds me of the 2010 World Cup, where the United States tied Britain 1-1, or tied England 1-1, and the newspapers the next day reported it very positively. Even this headline you can see from the New York Post, USA wins 1-1. And it's the same mentality. We were overmatched, facing a country that was much better at something than we were, and we held our own, and we fought them to a tie. So it feels like a win. Now, Madison's presidency was totally dominated by the drama surrounding the War of 1812, and he was remembered positively at the time for leading America during the war. It was a huge national crisis, and America came out on top. And, of course, keeping with the tradition of Washington, Madison retires after 2 terms. And America is actually in a much better spot than when he entered office. The problem with England and France is over with. They fought the War of 1812. The British problem has been sidelined. America is now more confident. The British respect us more because we actually were willing to fight them over some of these issues that had been annoying us for years. And now we're going to kind of be focused more on what happens in the Western Hemisphere from now on. So now the Monroe administration. After Madison retires, we have the election of 1816. And it was obvious at that point that the Democratic-Republican candidate would win the election because that party was becoming very popular, especially after the positive outcome of the war. And James Monroe was an obvious choice. He served as Secretary of War and Secretary of State at different times under James Madison. He was the nominee for the Democratic-Republicans, and he won easily, as you can see, with 84% of the vote in 1816. His election in 1820, which I'll talk about at the end, was even weirder for a different reason. And of course, we had actually a New York run candidate, Rufus King, for the Federalists. Didn't really win much. And the Federalists at this point are borderline extinct as a political party. So the problems facing President Monroe, fortunately for him, he had basically no problems to deal with. His focus was just getting America back to normal after the War of 1812 and improving America's power and position in the world. This was a happy time in America. People seemed to be getting along after the War of 1812. There wasn't like political parties fighting because there was basically one political party. And that is why this time period is nicknamed the Era of Good Feelings. And this is a good picture showing what people thought about that time period. It's like a big party. Everyone is celebrating. Everyone's happy, proud to be an American. They just held their own against Britain. The country's doing well. It's the Era of Good Feelings. And James Monroe is lucky enough to be president during the Era of Good Feelings, which means he doesn't have to deal with that much. So his foreign policy. So relations with Spain. All that drama earlier had to do with Britain and France. That drama is over with. Now let's talk about Spain. So Spain was in control of Florida at this time since the end of the Revolutionary War. And they couldn't stop slaves escaping to Florida and then attacking American settlements as part of the Seminole Nation, the Native American tribe. Remember that slavery is legal in the United States, but not legal in Spain. So slaves would cross the border into Florida, and they'd be getting freedom. So in 1817, Andrew Jackson, who was still a general at this point, was sent to recapture those who had escaped slavery, but he wound up destroying Seminole villages and forcing the Spanish governor to run away. And ultimately, Spain decided to give up Florida to the United States in the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. And that is why the Florida State mascot is the Seminoles. So the Florida State Seminoles, that's their team name for the college. So this is when America gets Florida, 1817, officially in 1819. So now Florida in 1819 is officially part of the United States. Monroe Doctrine. So newly independent Latin American countries had their independence threatened by Spain and other European powers. America wanted to protect trade with Latin America. So in 1823, President Monroe issued the Monroe Doctrine. So Monroe Doctrine is like a proclamation or like a rule. And it stated that America would not allow European nations to create American colonies or interfere with the free nations of Latin America. It's basically saying that America gets to deal with stuff that happens on this side of the Atlantic Ocean in the Western Hemisphere. European countries, you deal with stuff on the other side. And we have this perfect product. Hopefully I can get some sponsorship from these people. A shower curtain showing the divide. So the United States, you have Uncle Sam saying hands off. This hemisphere, this belongs to us. You guys stay on that side of the Atlantic. So this was America trying to basically solve the problem of European nations being involved in North and South America. They're saying, you guys stick to your stuff in Europe. We'll stick to our stuff here in the Americas. And the Monroe Doctrine eventually boosted American power and influence throughout North and South America. And it's going to be used in the future when countries want to get involved in stuff in the Americas. And America says, hey, we don't allow that. Monroe Doctrine. Domestic policy. Building the national economy. That was the big thing that the Monroe administration undertook. They chartered the second bank of the United States, and this bank lent money to individuals, controlled the money supply, gave a boost to American businesses, and that only grew after the war was over. A tariff, which is a tax on foreign products coming into America of 1816, was passed to help American businesses compete with Britain. It made the North, where all the factories were happy, but it made the South angry because they needed to pay more for products. So basically, it charged you more money for buying something that was made in another country. And the logical conclusion was that, okay, if you want to get something cheaply, you buy American and you help American businesses. That is the logic of a tariff. We also have the institution of Clay's American system, and it's partially adopted as a system of tariffs and public works to improve transportation and boost the economy in all parts of the country. Things like the national road, like repairing bridges, setting up transportation to make business run a lot smoother. All of that is part of Clay's American system. And the money starts flowing in, and you can smell it just like Vince McMahon can. There were some big Supreme Court rulings also during this time period. McCulloch versus Maryland. This was a Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court protected the Second Bank of the United States, saying that a state was not allowed to tax the bank and only the federal government could. So this again is strengthening the power of the federal government. Then the other second landmark case was Dartmouth College versus Woodward. The Supreme Court protected private contracts as a protection for private businesses, saying the government couldn't interfere. So if you made a deal with somebody, the government couldn't step in and undo it. So it's basically saying that anytime you do a business deal and you agree with somebody else, then it's legal, it's solid. The government can't just step in and undo it. And that was one of the things that helped businesses as well. Gibbons versus Ogden was the third major Supreme Court ruling during the Monroe administration. And it ruled that New York could not give a monopoly to a steamboat company operating on the Hudson because its route crossed state lines and the federal government has the power to regulate interstate commerce. What that means in English is that New York was basically giving one business the right to ship people back and forth along the Hudson. And the federal government, through the Supreme Court, stepped in and said, New York, you're not allowed to do that. You can't just say only you can give one company the right to travel on this river, because this travel actually crosses state lines. And when anything crosses a state line, it's the federal government's job. So it made sure that states had an equal footing, that like New York couldn't discriminate against another state for trying to travel across the water through New York. That's all the domestic policy issues. There's only two foreign policy, two domestic policy issues for Monroe. And the election of 1820. Very strange election. And we're probably never going to see an election like this again. So James Monroe basically ran for re-election unopposed. Nobody ran against him. And he won every single state. And he only lost one electoral vote because a faithless elector, if you remember that term, decided to write John Quincy Adams' name on the ballot. And John Quincy Adams was already a Republican as well. And there's many theories as to why this person wrote John Quincy Adams' name on the ballot. Some people thought that he was kind of preparing for the election of 1824 and wanting to kind of encourage John Quincy Adams to run, which he does. Others thought that maybe he did it because he only wanted George Washington to have the popularity or the distinction of being the one president who got all of the electoral votes. But James Monroe, him and Washington, and the only ones in this group who won every single state in the election. And the election just showed the popularity of Monroe and the total control the Democratic-Republican Party had over the United States. Federalists basically being extinct as a political party at this point. They will never run in an election again. So press F to pay respects to the Federalist Party. And James Monroe, keeping with tradition, he retires after 2 terms. You might see his image on those dollar coins. I actually see a lot of James Monroe dollar coins. They usually put Washington, Jefferson, even Adams on there. But you'll also see James Monroe. Originally they put Sacagawea, the Native American, on there. But James Monroe you'll see sometimes. He was also on a $100 bill, a silver certificate. Not used anymore. But it looks pretty cool. There's images of both right here, if you were curious. Now our third and final segment of the day. Weird news. 3 great stories for you today. The first one. Man forced to quarantine in ghost town with gruesome past. It sounds like a horror movie. It literally sounds like a spin-off of The Shining. And I have the details of the story right here. They're pretty weird. If you look at the article in the New York Post, apparently it's a man named Brent Underwood. He spent millions of dollars to buy an entire ghost town, which had been abandoned many, many, many years ago. And apparently people think the town is haunted. And he went up there to do repairs, and he got snowed in when all of this coronavirus stuff happened, and he's been stuck there ever since. Well, all work and no play. Hopefully it doesn't make Brent Underwood a dull boy. But I wish him well, and I hope he makes it out. And the problem is, actually, it's not a problem at all. He might actually be the safest one. That's like ultimate social distancing, being by yourself in a ghost town. So I'll keep my eye on the story. Story number 2. Neighbor sends Pokemon apology cake after calling cops on them. So this story took place, I believe, it was in the United States, in Florida. Okay, so it was in Florida. There were a couple of kids that were playing Pokemon Go, and some neighbors found it suspicious, and they called the cops on these kids. And then they were sorry when they found out what was going on, and they sent them a Pokemon-themed cake. So clearly the neighbors thought that they were in the business of having to catch them all, trying to catch all the neighborhood loiterers and neighborhood criminals, and they overstepped their bounds and called the cops on some kids playing Pokemon Go. But they apologized. Nice cake. It's making me hungry right now. Yeah. Pokemon apology cake. Something new every day. And story number 3. Something like this is always coming out of the UK. I showed you that binder color switch last time. Now I'm looking at this, and I can't make any sense of this either. Confusing extra arm spotted in government graphic urging people to stay home. The official UK Prime Minister Twitter account has been tweeting a series of images to tell people to stay home during the coronavirus pandemic, but one has sparked an odd debate. And if you look at this image, we have 2 people sitting on a couch and a dog, but there is a strange phantom hand appearing out of nowhere. If you look below the orange bowl, there is a hand with a watch on it with a black sleeve just jetting out of this dog, but it doesn't look like this hand belongs to either of the women in the photo, or the dog for that matter. I'm trying to figure out where the hand is coming from, but it's a phantom hand. No one knows what's going on. It's kind of terrifying if there's like someone underneath the couch just reaching up. If you have a theory on where this arm belongs, let us know. And we're going to sign off at this point. It is Monday's edition of Free LEPRE Radio. Have a great productive week, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.